Well, good morning. My name is Jack. For those that don't know me, I'm the youth minister here at Warragul Anglican. What holidays would you consider to be the most significant on our calendar? It's worth saying, not just the holidays that we get the most public holidays for, the most time off for, but the holidays that mean the most to most people. For many people, it would probably be Christmas and Easter. Pretty much all of us look forward to them. There's something about them that just feels different. It feels special. The decorations are up down the street. The shops change their shop fronts. Most families will make an effort to catch up on that weekend. There's a sense, even if many people might struggle to put it into words, that something significant is being marked. Sometimes people that haven't been to church in years will choose those Sundays to come to church. And even people that wouldn't be able to recognise what those holidays are marking deliberately would still put up a tree, maybe do an Easter egg hunt, recognise the day, have a meal with family or friends. But if you asked most Australians, what are you celebrating? What's the point of the day? And if you really press them on it, I think the answers get pretty vague pretty quickly. Well, it's about family. It's about being together. It's about gratitude, something like that. We know it feels meaningful, but the meaning itself is hard to locate. And this is what we've done as a society. We've kept the celebration while allowing the reason for it to slip away. It can feel like, at least at those times of year, that our culture worships the holiday without really knowing what it is it's worshipping. And this is what Paul walks into in Acts 17, as we've just heard read. Paul has been run out of a string of cities. He's been in Thessalonica, he's been in Berea, and he's ended up in Athens as he's waiting for his co-workers in the gospel to catch up with him. And while he's there, he's going for a wander around. He's having a look. He's probably doing that touristy thing. He's going, seeing what's around. But verse 16 says he was greatly distressed. He was greatly distressed to find out that what he is surrounded by is a city full of idols. Athens was famous for its idols. The ancient author Petronius joked in an ancient text that it was often easier to find a god in Athens than it was another man. There was a god for the sea, a god for the harvest, a god for wisdom, for war. There was an estimated 30,000 gods that were being worshipped in the city of Athens. And Paul's walking around, you might imagine he's shaking his head, he's distressed at what he's seeing. But he finds something that takes him back, he's taken aback. Tucked among all of the named altars is one with a different inscription, to an unknown God. You sort of go, oh yeah. Even in a city that had 30,000 gods, they had to cover their bases just to be sure, had to fill it up with the gap, a bit of a placeholder, just in case there was one extra one that they hadn't managed to name yet. And so Paul stands up before the Areopagus, which is sometimes called Mars Hill. It's the city's ancient council of thinkers, civic leaders, philosophers. And he doesn't mock what he sees. He doesn't mock what's going on. He doesn't say, gee, how embarrassing are you guys? You need 30,000 and you've still got it wrong. He doesn't say that. Instead, he simply clarifies in verse 23, what you worship as unknown, this I am going to proclaim to you. He takes their search seriously and recognises that this is what they're doing. They're searching in their gods. It's worth thinking about what the people of Athens were worshipping. They weren't worshipping nothing. They were worshipping real things that they could see. The God of the sea, the God of the harvest, the God of wisdom. Paul's distress wasn't because Athens was full of people worshipping nothing at all. They were worshipping real things. And often these were things that were real good things. They just didn't know where these things came from. And so ultimately they were worshipping something they didn't know. Hence we get the altar to the unknown God. Today, in some ways, it can be easy to identify that we live in Athens. In verse 21, it describes the kind of city that Athens is, and I think this describes the time that we live in as well. The Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas, philosophizing about what's going on, what right and wrong really means, how we should act in the world. We don't live in Athens in an ancient sense. We don't have shrines on our street corners, 30,000 gods all around Warragul. But the pattern that we're in is the same. We have with us a culture full of things that we treat as the ultimate end. They're things that we hear everywhere: love, respect, dignity, moral order, right and wrong. Things that our society worships without knowing where they came from. So the question that Paul raises for us is whether we really know what it is we're actually worshipping. Have we located the source, or are we just standing in front of a road sign, taking a photo in front of it and calling that the destination? Think about the messages that we hear every day. We hear them in the media, in entertainment, in sport, in organisations. Love, respect, inclusion, dignity. These are good things, and it's good that we care about them. Why do they really matter, though? Why does love matter? Why does it really matter? Because, well, if you ask someone, because it just does. Why is every human being deserving of dignity? Well, because they are, because it's good. Why is it good? Well, it is. Why should we respect one another? Respect is important. We can recognise that these values are important. We've built our society on them. But do we really know them? Do we really know love? In John's first letter, he sums it up simply. We love because he first loved us. That's the complete sentence. We love because he first loved us. But that first half, we love, is the value that we cling to as a society. We love. The second half, because he first loved us, is the part that's lost. And when you remove that second part, we're left with a command that just seems to exist without any explanation. We love because love is important. Well, love is important, but why is it more important than power? What happens when love comes into conflict with some other value? What wins out? Without the source of love, these sort of questions don't have answers. And this is what Paul means when he tells the Athenians in verse 23 that they are ignorant of the very thing that they worship. He's not telling them that the thing that they're worshipping is meaningless. He's just saying, you folks don't know what it is you're really worshipping. And the problem with this, with worshipping something that we don't really know, is that eventually it'll start to hollow out. When love is the highest value but has no source, it can become just whatever the loudest person in the room says it is. This is what love is. No, this is what love is. What really is love? The values that are supposed to hold everything together start pulling in different direction based on opinion, based on what I think love is. And nobody can understand why, because the explanation has been cut off a long time before. It's sort of like keeping a family tradition without remembering what it's for. Maybe there's a certain way that you have dinner together as a family, or a certain way that you set the house up, certain family traditions that you maintain regularly. We can maintain them carefully over the years, but if the reason behind why we do it is lost, eventually someone will ask, well, why do we do things this way? And there's not a real answer anymore. The answer is just because we've always done it this way. In some ways, it's easy to diagnose that we live in Athens. It seems like there's foreign gods everywhere. Everyone in our world worshipping something. It's like, yep, I get this, I understand this. But this problem of worshipping something that we don't understand holds true of us too. We can't just stay outside and point fingers at the Athenians, worshipping things they don't understand. As Christians, we can hold fast to tradition without really understanding why either, without recognizing the living God behind them. Well, why do we say the Lord's Prayer every week? Because that's just what we do. Why do we take a moment to greet everyone with peace every week? Well, it feels good to do so. Actually, there are real reasons why we do these things. They point to the living God. I wonder what your reflection would be if you asked yourself why you come to church every week. Think about, well, why do I come to church every week? Well, I love the fellowship that we get. It's my weekly tradition. It's something that my parents always did. I love singing songs of worship. I love hearing the kids' song. I love morning tea. None of these are bad reasons to come to church. There aren't a lot of bad reasons to come to church, but we need to be careful. These things aren't what we worship. And if they are, then we don't really know what we're worshipping either. We're Athenians. We're worshipping the catch-all signpost without considering what actually might be going on underneath it. Are we worshipping something that we don't really know? It's the same problem that Stephen identified with the Pharisees in Acts 7 that we heard about a while ago. Keeping the law, keeping tradition, while having hearts that Stephen called uncircumcised. They didn't really know what they were worshipping either, even though they would have called the Athenians idolaters. They had the same problem. And the reason for that, if we're really honest, the reason for it is that if we know God, it forces us into a state of discomfort. If we know a real God, then he's the kind of God that shows up and will make real claims on our lives. Claims that don't fit neatly into the way our lives are set up. It's a real God that won't just back off when we say, well, sure, but I've got other things to do too. It's a real God that won't just bend to fit our own preferences about what our values should be, what justice means. A God we don't really know is much easier to live with. It's a God who's just a value that we hold, a tradition that we do every week. It's a feeling that we appreciate. It feels good. That God leaves us in charge. We get to define the terms. We get to decide what counts. We get to pick when we're paying attention and when we're not. And that's what's underneath both the Athenians and the Pharisees. They both had systems where they were ultimately the ones in control. The Athenians controlled their gods by stacking up enough of them so no individual god could really make any difference. I can pick and choose which one I want. There's 30,000. Which one do I want to follow? I don't know. The Pharisees tried to control God by reducing him to a code that they could keep. Traditions, laws. It led to the same outcome. God kept at a manageable distance. And for the Athenians, there was no easy way out. They couldn't finally meet God just by adding more altars. Let's add an extra couple hundred just to be sure. Maybe that way we'll finally meet the real God. That wasn't the way out. So let's see what Paul had to say to them. In verse 24, Paul doesn't stand up and mock them. He doesn't try to compare gods. Say, oh, well, my God's better than yours because he does this and yours only does this. In verse 24, he declares, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands, and is not served by human hands. He gives everyone life and breath and everything else. This is what Paul declares. Paul's not just adding one more god to the pile that the Athenians had. They had gods for everything. But Paul's saying that the source that you've been gesturing at, that thing that you couldn't quite name, that feeling, that unknown God, he made all of it. The sea, the harvest, wisdom, he made you, the breath in our lungs. That's the God that we don't know, that you don't know. And he goes further in verse 27. God did this so that they would seek him and reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. The seeking that the Athenians are doing, which really this is what their 30,000 gods is a symptom of. It's a seeking after truth. This seeking is not ridiculous. We all seek truth. It's the reason that God set things up the way that he did. But this reaching, this seeking is meant to do something. It's meant to find something. And Paul says that something is closer than you realize. Verse 28, in him we live and move and have our being. We're not looking for God from a ways back, looking out with binoculars trying to spot him. We actually already live inside the reality that he holds together himself. And so therefore, if this is all true, therefore we get verse 29, therefore since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. It's logical. If God made us and we're his offspring, then God can't be something that we've made. God can't be an altar made by humans if God made us. A God that we can sculpt is no God at all. A God that we can fit on a shelf, fold into a slogan, define however we like, that's not the God that's actually there. And in verse 30 is where the turn lies. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. But now. The most important words in this passage, really. But now. The stakes have been changed. The era of God letting people roam around in ignorance without bringing in the full reckoning with him, that era is over. And it's over because God stepped out of that unknown and into our human history. God has named himself. He has set a day, in verse 31, he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed, and he has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. This is how what was unknown to the Athenians becomes known, that God didn't stay distant. He didn't stay unknown. He became a man. He lived a real life on earth, died a real death, and was raised publicly in history. The resurrection is obviously a miracle, but that's not its only purpose. Paul here calls the resurrection proof. It's proof. The resurrection is God's evidence. It's how he becomes known. And this means for us that everything that our culture searches for, that tries to name, the importance of love, why dignity matters, why respect matters, these ideas have a foundation. They have a story that we can tell. We can tell you why love matters. It comes from the God who is love, who showed it by sending his son. Dignity doesn't just feel nice, it comes from being made in the image of the God who made us. All people made in God's image. Justice isn't whatever feels right in the moment. Justice belongs to the God who will judge the world with justice. And in church, the prayers, the songs, the tradition that we hold on to in church has a center. They're not just their own thing. It's not just some nice feeling. They're centered on Jesus. They're there to lead us to him. So how do people respond? Well, verse 32 says that when they heard about the resurrection, some of them sneered. Some of them said, well, we want to hear about this again later, maybe on our time. Some of them believed. There's a mixed response. And that's still what happens. Some hear that the unknown God has named himself and they roll their eyes. I don't want to claim on my life. I don't want to know him. Some say maybe later, maybe on my own time, maybe when it suits me. Some believe. The unknown God isn't unknown anymore. He has a name. And so the question that Paul leaves the Athenians with, and the question that he leaves us with this morning, is this: would you like to keep God unknown? Do we want to keep him at that manageable distance, just off to the side, alongside all the other gods that we worship? Or do we really want to know him? Because if we do, he has made himself known to us in Jesus. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you have not stayed unknown. Thank you that in Jesus you have stepped out of the silence and named yourself. Help us, Father, to actually know you, to live as people who have been claimed by the God who is not far from any one of us. In your name, Father. Amen.